What is going on, you guys? My name's Ryan, the official host here at Reddit Voice, bringing you guys a brand new episode of r/MaliciousCompliance. Before we jump into that, though, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit that subscribe button and that notification bell to stay up to date on all the latest videos. Crappy boss will forever regret trying to bring the thunder. Backstory: I started working in care of the elderly before I graduated school, at age 17 as a temp worker, and after I graduated I basically worked full-time for several years. Finally got a steady employment at age 23. I take pride in my job, and even though I didn't study medical stuff, I've always made sure I know everything I need to know to do a good job, with online classes, certificates, and reading up on medications, treatment recommendations, etc. Everything was going well, despite me having 4 different bosses in the first 5 years of work. No one wants to be the boss here. Economically speaking, it's a sinking ship, since it's government-run and dependent on tax money. Then friendly boss Lena joins the story. She asked me to move over to a new department the state was now, by law, obligated to provide: short-term care. She had previously run the emergency care unit at the local hospital, and she didn't take crap from anyone. She let us workers build up and run the department because, as any good boss should, she realized that we knew better what we were doing, because we were going to do it day to day, and what worked best for us, as long as we stuck within the laws, regulation, staff requirements, and budget, of course. Everything was amazing for almost 2 years. Every month I did the schedules for all 15 of the workers. I did daily planning for all patients, and I was in charge of all documentation and all new guidelines and protocols being implemented, since the care provided was brand new in our area. Then the day of great sadness came, when Lena declared she was leaving since she'd been offered a job as the head chief of the local hospital. All of us were devastated to see her go, but I mean, good for her. That's when Super Bitch enters our story, also known as Kajsa. I hope I said that right. She was already the boss of the normal elderly care units, where I'd worked before. I'd already moved on to short-term care before she was hired as a boss, and we had heard exclusively bad things about her. We heard she would always do what she thought was the right thing to do, which was almost exclusively wrong because she was underqualified, had no experience from the actual work, and was just a bitch in general. Our first staff meeting, she told us either you're with me or against me, and the people who were against me I drown in local lake. Okay, great start. I then tried to explain to her that with our previous boss, we'd worked with trust, since Lena had an understanding that us co-workers actually know what works best in our own department, and Kajsa instantly shut it down. No, I'm the boss, I set the protocols, I decide how my department's run. Yeah, of course, but I'm just saying we've been working like, no, I'm the boss, I'm in charge. And so it began. Kajsa started changing the schedules, the protocols, the staff requirements, the daily rehab schedule, the food schedule, not joking by the way, and she lowered the required medical competence to work at our units. This means there were people working with us who had no prior experience in the job and had no prior experience in the field, barely spoke the language, etc. Keep in mind we had dementia evaluation, palliative care, end-of-life care, stroke rehabilitation, and so on. Malicious compliance. Kajsa started trying to micromanage everything we did. Literally everything. She canceled all the activities we did for the whole business, like pub nights in the elderly, movie nights, summer cafe, outdoors, walks, store visits, everything. All without cost to the business. She stated that we're no longer allowed to finish the schedules on our own and gave us 2 weeks less to finish them, which means we now have 1 week to input the schedule, try to settle it between us 15 people, and hand it over to her. She'd finish it and hand it to us the day before it went into effect, and 8 out of 10 days the shifts weren't covered. Or we were 6 people working the same weekend, supposed to be 3. So I told Kajsa that I'd been managing the schedule for years and was happy to keep doing it, and that she'd still have the schedule in 2 weeks early. No. I told her that our activities were 100% within paid and no strain on the day-to-day normal business, and we want to keep doing them. No. I told her that we'd prefer to keep doing things as we'd been doing them for years because it worked very well. No. Obviously I was pissed. So were my coworkers, but they never spoke up. That was my job, I guess. There were a lot of incidences that I'm not going to bother bringing up, but just imagine that anything that was ever wanted to do for our patients and the people in the dementia units, or for the well-being of the staff, was just no. One thing that had been consistent since I started working there when I was 17, 27 at this point in the story, is that when you apply for vacation or any kind of leave, you input the leave request and then you request a temp to cover your shift, and then you inform your boss that you've done both of those things. Always been like that. Always. So I did. I requested a day's leave. My mom had a doctor's thing in town for a few hours from here. I input the temp request and then I walked to the boss and informed her. She loses it. Maybe because Kajsa's boss was there. I didn't know, but she starts yelling, telling me that I'm not allowed to request temps and that that's her job. I stand there and take it like a good employee and just say, okay, won't happen again. Big surprise for her is when the next staff meeting comes around and there suddenly weren't any staff on the actual ward, and a local politician was sat waiting with her mother, who was being committed to the ward that day, for over 2 hours. I wonder who made sure they were arriving at that time on that day. I told my boss's boss exactly why there weren't any temps on the scheduled meeting, and Kajsa got fired. This will make me smile for the rest of my life. Edit 1, acronyms and some spelling, I hope. Edit 2, holy crap, this blew up. Thank you, everyone. New owner wants us to carry garbage bags through a crowded restaurant? Okay, you're the boss. This is another story about my bartending days, and I'll preface by saying, even though it got my point across, not then, nor do I now feel good about what happened here. So slight backstory, I was working as a bar manager in a student pub. The new owner and I hated each other. It was actually scary just how deep that hatred ran. However, I was his fastest bartender and simply too popular amongst the other employees to just fire. So instead, he would always belittle me in front of clients or other staff members and find ways to make my job more insufferable. I'm guessing in hopes that I would simply quit. So the bar was at the front of the store, the exit was right by the front entrance, which led through a caged-off alley, which led to the alley where we dumped all the garbage from the bar and restaurant. We had always carried the refuge out of the way. It was easy, effective, and we didn't have to walk through the restaurant carrying garbage bags. So obviously, the new owner made the rational decision to start locking that way off and forbidding us from using it. This meant that we now had to walk through the restaurant where people were eating up a mini stairwell and through the kitchen. I don't even know how many health and safety regulations this was violating. I had protested this at several staff meetings, explaining to him that us not being allowed to go that way doubled the trip, which left the bar a man short for double the time. It was also double the time for the bags to tear, considering they were usually stuffed filled with heavy and sometimes broken bottles, and mostly if it was just unsanitary walking through the restaurant and kitchen with bags that were usually dripping fluids. So obviously, he refused and said we'll continue doing it his way. Cut forward a few nights, and the place was packed, likely to overcapacity, but for in case it wasn't clear, safety concerns weren't much of a priority for this twat. I should also point out that the bar had only one garbage bin, which had filled up several beer bottles ago. The other bartenders had been ignoring it because if you're carrying out garbage bags, then you're not serving customers, and if you're not serving customers, you're not making tips. So I decided to take this task upon myself and venture out of the bar. I felt like Frodo carrying the ring to Mordor. As I mentioned, the bag was already over its recommended weight capacity, so I had to get through this crowd fast, because I felt it was going to tear very quickly. Some of the glass had broken inside the bag too, and started cutting into me as I tried carrying the bag from the bottom to keep it from tearing open, all while fighting my way through a crowd of drunk students. I finally made it to the mini stairwell by the kitchen where the drunk owner and a random drunk girl was sitting on the stairs. The bag was now super close to tearing and my hands were covered in blood from getting cut by the glass. I tried getting the stupid boss's attention, begging him to move so I could get past. The boss ignored me, And I'll say that the first time it was entirely possible that he may not have heard me over the crowd and the loud music. So I tried again, and this time he looked straight at me and continued to ignore me anyway. Cue the malicious compliance as I lift the bag right over him and the girl, just for it to tear open right above them, drowning them both in dripping bottles and beer and pieces of shattered glass. I felt bad for the girl, as she had not deserved this. As for the owner, screw him. The kitchen staff heard the crash and screams and ran out to clean the mess. I tried helping, but they told me to go back to the bar. A few seconds later, the owner came storming into the bar, screaming at me and asking me what possessed me to try and lift a garbage bag over the head of him and a customer. I innocently said that I wouldn't have had to if he just let us go through the alley, and the owner gave me the biggest death glare I have ever gotten, then took the alley keys off his key ring, threw it at me, and stormed out of the bar. So even though I had been forced to cover a girl in glass to get my point across, I still walked out of this battle victorious. Just to add, this happened back in 2008, and I haven't bartended since 2009. I just enjoy recalling these stories because of how absurd that place was. But unfortunately, I won't be able to use any of this advice anymore on how I could rectify this. For those of you upset at me for endangering the girl, I agree. I think it's literally said in the first sentence of the story that I felt bad about it, and I still do to this day. But she wasn't injured. Neither was my stupid boss, unfortunately, and this was 12 years ago. I was barely older than 19, and we all did things in our younger years that we weren't proud of. Lastly, it actually just annoys me that I have to add this, but I'm not from the US, and the legal drinking age in my country is 18, not 21. Therefore, I was legally allowed to serve alcohol before turning 21. And that about does it for today's episode of r/MaliciousCompliance. If you liked it, make sure to leave a like on this video and check out our other stuff because you'll probably like that too. As always, my name's Ryan, the official host here at Reddit Voice, and I look forward to seeing each and every one of you guys in the next video.